welcome to At Center Stage at the NAFEM show. I'm Allison Godlove. Joining me now for workforce development in today's ever-changing world is Maureen Welch. She is with Create the Solution. She has a background in management consulting and equipment product management, particularly around transformation. Also, Julie Davis. She is the Senior Director, Workforce and Industry Initiatives with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, and Chef Adam Busby, the General Manager of the Culinary Institute of America's California campus. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to see you. How are you feeling about the show so far? How's it going?
It's very exciting.
Yes, very fun.
Yeah, good to be back.
Yes.
Very good to be back.
Great, well, wonderful. Well, let's get right into it. We've been talking here for just a while. They've been already having great conversations, so you are certainly in for a treat this afternoon. So let's start, Julie, with you. Why does talent strategy need to align with business strategy?
Yeah, I think that is just a really key concept. And as you're thinking about workforce, everybody can nod their head and say, yes, workforce is an issue. But I think really understanding the future of work and looking at labor demographics really sets the stage for this conversation and creates some urgency around why we need to make some changes. I like to start by saying doing what you've always done is not even getting you what you used to get, right? And so why is that happening? What has changed? And what do we need to do differently in order to manage that? Let's start with, and I'm going to run through some of these labor demographics just to set the stage. Let's start with who is working. As of December, our current labor market force participation rate was 62.2%. Based on our population growth, we would need 2.9 million more people in the labor force to recover to the 63.4% labor force participation rate pre-COVID. So 2.9 million more people to get where we were before COVID.
Wow.
And we would need 175 million more people in the labor force just to have the number of bodies that we had working before COVID. So just those numbers alone really set the stage for what the future of work looks like. COVID in 2020 knocked 2.4 million women out of the workforce in 1 year. That is staggering. And right now the unemployment rate for women is about 3.6%, but what that doesn't take into account is the over 1 million women who have not yet returned to the labor force.
Yep.
So that's very significant. Starting notably in the 1990s, and this is really important for manufacturers, male workers between the ages of 25 and 54 have moved towards voluntarily leaving the labor market or preferring part-time employment. That is prime age working men. Sources cite that some of this is influenced by inheritance or support from their boomer parents and grandparents, and this has resulted in some very significant social shifts in that group, in that they are less likely to marry, less likely to purchase a home, and more likely to be living at home with their parents and grandparents. This is likely, and again, this is a staggering thing if you haven't heard it before, this is likely due to the tremendous wealth that the boomers have. Right now, the boomers are the wealthiest generation in US history.
Wow.
However, millennials are expected to inherit an estimated $68 trillion from their boomer parents by 2030. 2030, not that far away, shifting the greatest generation of wealth to those millennials. And so you can see how those really are shaping what that future of work looks like. And then let's look at the job market itself. Currently there's 10.5 million job openings, and there are 6 million unemployed people. So if my math is right, we have 4 million more job openings than we have people looking to fill them. We have seen in the US declining birth rates since the 1970s, with the last 2 years having historic low birth rate years, both of them. So as you're looking at workforce, we're not birthing 30-year-olds. So what does that mean as we've seen that trend, right? Obviously, I don't need to tell anybody that there's a high level of retirement. net migration is projected to slow in nearly 60% of developed economies over the next 20 years. And what that means is that immigration, if you think it's a solution, maybe it is for you, but it's not going to be an easy solution, because the countries that the US typically pull immigrants from to do work, those countries are also seeing a reduction in their birth rate, and they are seeing low unemployment. So thinking that immigration is going to somehow fix our workforce woes is actually not going to happen. And then this one will cheer everybody up. And it is the last data point that I want to make to set the stage here. But according to Deloitte's latest global millennial survey, 49% of millennials are slated to quit their jobs in the next 2 years. 49%. So let me wrap that all up and put it in a basket with a bow on it and say, this is what the future of work looks like. Fewer available people, more jobs, more diversity in jobs available, and more competition across industries, right? We know that workers right now that are under the age of 35 typically hold a job nationwide 2.8 years, and you're not competing with your industry sector, you're competing now with all of the industry sectors because they're exploring. Immigration, as I mentioned, not an easy solution. Diversity is not optional. If we're looking to fill those work gaps that allow us to be innovative, that allow us to maintain or increase our production, that allow us to drive operational success, we need to be looking at everything. And so when I talk to my industry sector, what I talk to them is about aligning the talent strategy with the business strategy. Because how can you have a strategy of growth if you don't have anything that aligns that and supports that? We have board of directors in our industry for large companies that say to their presidents, if you're going to bring me a growth strategy, you better have a talent strategy written out that supports that growth strategy, or the answer is going to be no. And then knowledge transfer and succession planning is critical as we look forward. You don't have time for the lost knowledge and people trying to figure it out. What you need to do is be asking critical questions before people are going and harvesting that knowledge. And then lastly, employee training and development is going to become the new norm. We are now a nation with the technology advances and the shift in workforce demands that we are going to be continually running through a cycle of upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling our workforce. And so that is going to become the new normal, and we need to respond to that as industry. So that is the lay of the land, and hopefully gives you a sense of urgency around, wow, this is why doing what I've always done is no longer getting me what I used to get. Now we need to talk about what are we going to do differently so that we can have strategies that will be successful.
And that really is something that we were discussing, is that there has to be a change. You have to adjust, as you were just mentioning, to meet the needs that are out there in the industry, which is where you would come into play in this situation, because you would go in and you would facilitate some of these changes. So explain a little bit about your position doing so.
I think what Julie pointed out is you can't look at labor by itself. It's really an ecosystem, and you have to look at the work, the worker, and the workplace. That workplace might be a corporation, it could be a prison, it could be an institution, but you can't separate those three things anymore. And really what Julie is talking about is labor is a scarce resource, and we need a sustainability plan, not just for our natural resources, but also for our people resources. And plans need to have a programmatic approach. It's not a one and done answer. This is a total tectonic shift in how we look at labor. Labor is not disposable. There's not another person behind the person who left. Retaining people is rehiring people is very expensive. People are concerned that retaining is expensive. Well, rehiring is a lot more expensive. And it's really about creating choices for people that make them want to stay, and creating career paths and opportunities, and really having employees feel part of the organization. Yeah, the money's important. Yeah, amenities are important. One of the most important things are alignment with purpose. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves. If they are going to work and choose to work, many don't just want a job. They want to line up with an organization that shares their values and is aligned with the culture that they can sign up with.
Which goes back to what you were saying. It's not just competing within your industry, you're competing with all of the industries because people are so focused on what's going to work for them. And that's a big shift that maybe you've definitely seen after the pandemic or even during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I will say when we were having this conversation about what the impact of COVID has been, COVID is an exclamation point in talent. It accelerated every trend that was beginning, and it said, and we're done. There is a new shift, there's a new future in what that needs to look like, and it really requires us to have new thoughts about how we approach it, new strategies, new tactics, and that's where aligning your talent strategy with your business strategy, bringing people who have people strategy skills to your C-suite table become critically important if you want to drive success.
So Chef Adam, let's bring you in on this
Makes
because
sense.
really this is going back to where you're coming into play and really looking at a lot of changes that are taking place in academia. So how is that then preparing the talent to then enter the workforce into the state of the industry right now?
Sure, right. We're obviously we're one of the pipelines for the industry, and it's funny, you know, once upon a time, going back a few years, you would go into first day of college class and ask everybody, you know, what do you want to do? What do you want to become? And just about unanimously, everyone would put up their hand and say, I want to be a chef. I want to own a restaurant. That's my aspiration. Those are my goals. I've come to your school to get there. Scroll forward to today, I go into our freshman classes on the first day or so and say, how many people want to be a chef? And less than half the people put up their hands. So there's a change there. There's a step change there that has happened, gradually, as I think more and more doors have opened for students as far as their career ambitions, right? You don't just have to be a chef or a pastry chef anymore. I want to write about food. I want to blog about food. I want to be in movies and produce food. I want to cater. I want to work on a cruise ship, a hotel. I want to work in manufacturing and industry, be a food scientist. There's just so many options now that being a chef is just one of many, many options. So that's definitely changed, and I think fair to say that the CIA's matured from its beginning as a trade school now into an institute of higher education, because we need to be able to train the workforce, our students, to those various different pockets where they're going to find their careers, their employment, and CIA has risen to that challenge by developing different courses. So you can come to CIA now and do a degree in culinary arts or baking pastry, but you can also go further than that. You can get your bachelor's degrees in food business management, in hospitality management, in culinary science, lots and lots of pathways leading off those degrees, obviously. And now we even offer master's degrees, and those are becoming increasingly popular. Masters in food business, masters in sustainable food systems. Talk about something that's going to be a large industry sector in the future. Masters in wine, beverage management. These are all leading students to different careers in the hospitality industry that are not just cooking and not just baking. So that's a big shift, and what we have retained is the fact that you need to hone your skills somewhere. You need to develop those skills. So we have within our constellation of facilities. We have restaurants where students can come and they can work, and they can hone their skills, the front of house skills, the back of house skills. And then all our students also do semester-long externships where they can get out there in the industry, they can work in the food service industry, or I think there's a lot of opportunities to develop working externships in other industries. For example, the industry that we have assembled here, food equipment manufacturing. There's lots of students that are interested in that. You know, how do we get more of those students in the pipeline into those industries, at least for an externship, so they can see what it's about and decide, hey, you know what, this is something I really want to do. Now I've got my foot in my door, foot in your door. We can see where this will go. So, so that's important, is to develop those pipelines into the other industries so that those students can kind of pursue their dreams in the other pathways that they're thinking about, right?
Well, stick with that for just a moment. This pipeline that you're saying to get these students or to get other people within the industry to look at this pipeline differently, how does that happen?
I think there's a lot of ways it happens. I think that, you know, we think of art as a common language. We think of music as a common language. Food is a common language, and it's a common language that, as Chef said, it cuts across all industries. And it's to really elevate the importance of food. Food, yes, there's times when it's a commodity, but there are other times when it's a really important differentiator. It's something that can be tied to well-being, to diversity and inclusion. So it's really to step back and not just look at food as this widget that we keep producing. It's the role that food has in our life, in our cultures, in our institutions, in our organizations, to see that it's a common thread that weaves through many industries, many opportunities. So it's to elevate. And we've been talking about this not just in this industry, but this is an important industry where we have to provide the opportunities where people see that this is a legitimate career path. It's not something you'll go do, and it's not disposable. It's not just entry level. We need to create paths within the industry and across industries, I think, is one way. So yes, absolutely, pipeline, it's got to be exciting, and we have to give people an opportunity to contribute. There's great ideas out there, and we need to give people a voice and an opportunity to bring their thoughts and ideas, their innovations, in a place that we can all benefit from it.
Right.
Does that start in a classroom with you?
It kind of does, and you know, the traditional, you know, culinary perspective, that path, that's a well-trodden path. I kind of know that if I leave school, I've got my education. If I go start to work in a restaurant or a hotel or whatever food service establishment, I kind of know what the path is. I'm going to work my way through the different levels. I'm going to absorb all that information, and I'll build my career that way. It's fairly clear, it's fairly traditional, and everybody kind of knows about that path. What isn't quite as clear is the pathways into the other industries. So all the other options that they have, they're there, but like, how do I get started, right? I've got my education, and now I'm gonna get into this food service manufacturing equipment company. What's my path there? Like, maybe I did my externship with you, maybe I spent some time and you know me a little bit, but what's my career path? That's less clear. I don't just necessarily want to come to you and work and have a job. I want to know what my options are, and how am I going to grow in this sector, and how am I going to achieve the success that I imagine for myself in your business. I think that needs a little bit of clarification, shall I say?
Yeah, and I want to jump in here because I'm always like, let's get to the tactics. What do we do with this? We have this opportunity. We've had these students that are looking to connect. We've got a pipeline. What do we know about this generation that's coming out? We know that they want to connect to a purpose. We know that they want to explore. We know that they want to try new things, that development is important to them, that appreciation is important to them. And so, you know, what are the trends that industry is starting that is really making you be able to leverage? Like, how can you get that competitive advantage to get these students in and find a place where natural abilities and interests and hobbies and likes really align with the work that you can do, because when you get somebody that loves what they're doing, they're going to stay with you, right?
Right.
So some of those trends that you can think about as you're thinking about how do I key in and leverage what I know about this new generation include things like internships in non-traditional pathways,
Yep.
right? So how can you bring somebody in and set up a job rotation internship for them so you're introducing them to all of the different aspects of your organization? Because if you set a purposeful and intentional internship where they're going through and they're getting exposed, your chances of retaining a great person who has a aha moment and says, I love this.
Right.
Now that increases, but that's going to take some creativity on your part, right? How can you think about creating career development pathways? You know, I've got manufacturing organizations that are sitting down and mapping out what happens if I start as a welder? What is the path for me to get to the C-suite? And you know, it's hard work. There's no easy button. But when we talk about leveraging that pipeline and capturing that next generation, you have to roll up your sleeves and say, here are the options that I've already thought of for you. And one of the things that I will share as far as data points is think about your employees as year one, they're learning their jobs. Year two, they're learning your organization. Year three, they're saying, what are you going to do for me? And that really correlates great with the data that we see at that 35-year or younger mark. We're at 2.8 years. What's happening? I'm asking you, what do you got for me? And you have no answer. Okay? So think about that as you're thinking about not only leveraging the pipeline and how can you help connect people to passion, but also think about how you're going to answer them in that third year.
Does this then go back to what we were talking about, that if you are having to meet those trends, you're going to have to make the changes, so that's where you can step in and help them figure out the best pathway?
Exactly, and the pathway can change. There's lots of data that people change jobs often, and that's perfectly okay as long as it's a forward trajectory, right? It doesn't have to be, step function. And I think that one of the important things is providing opportunities for different pathways, but some of those opportunities are to provide context. Some of you may have read that the concept of empathy, the ability to relate to your customer, but also to relate to your colleagues by giving people developmental opportunities so that an engineer has to be a salesperson for 6 months. And these opportunities, it doesn't mean that engineer wants to become a salesperson. It means that the engineer has empathy for the salesperson, understands the client. So these pathways are generally they can be linear. Some people, I was not one of them, knew what they wanted to be when they were 6 years old. I've taken the scenic route, and I think a lot of people are interested in taking the scenic route. So some of those development opportunities are to build a bigger understanding of the ecosystem. And I think that, we've become so fractionalized and fragmented and specialists. We need to blend to be specialists, but also to understand our role in a bigger thing. And it sounds lofty, but it is about sustainability. It is about giving people a career path to make money, to get out of poverty, to build a new generation, to replace tribal knowledge with institutional knowledge in order to become more innovative. And to look at, this industry is very entrepreneurial. It has to be. But how do we translate that entrepreneurial spirit into something where innovation is all the time? It's not just checking the box, but it's inbred and just part of the way of doing things.
Yeah. What I really hear you saying is this is the difference of pre-COVID. People might be considered human capital. now humans are humans.
Yep.
And you're going to need to be in conversation with them all the time. And I bet if I asked you between 10 years ago and now, the amount of engagement and relationship and conversation that students are looking for probably has shifted. And in an employer-employee relationship, how do you do that for people? You have to talk with them. You have to be in conversation. You need to be asking them. And what I will say is, don't ask them for feedback that you don't intend to follow up on or act off of, because that is like literally the worst thing you can do. But people are expecting a more human experience in their job, and I am going to guess that you have seen that at school.
Totally. No, absolutely. And to add to that, the development of those pathways that we keep going back to, it's our industry. A lot of, I think, youngsters in our industry see the food and beverage industry as kind of it's a transient thing I can do. I'm going to college. I'm going to work in a hotel, or I'm going to work in a restaurant while I'm going through college, and then I'm going to start my career. And we need to somehow change that whole paradigm from food and beverage industry is a great career. It's been a great career for all of us and probably everybody here. But that's not necessarily the first thing that folks think about. They think of it as, hey, this is something I can do to make money, get myself through college. And there's more to that there. And we need to be able to show those people that the industry isn't just a stopgap measure. It's something that you can actually build a career out of, be very proud and well rewarded. If you want to be the next superstar TV chef, there's a pathway for that as well. But there's so many different things you can do. It's not just a stopgap job anymore. No.
So how do companies then cultivate a culture to get there? How do you create that from the beginning of a career and the middle of a career, and then continue so you have that kind of culture or that kind of change that you need to do that? How do you do it?
It doesn't happen naturally. It's like a plant. You have to water it. You have to weed it. It's not something, again, that's one and done. And an organization always has to be self-reflective. You can't just say, this is my culture, it's a great culture, you should be happy to be here. There has to be a willingness to grow with your employees. It's not so much that your employees grow with you. You have to grow with your employees. Sure. They're the ones who are going to be bringing the ideas. The hierarchy is shifting. It's not always about top down anymore. It's much more about a community of influence. So there has to be an openness. There has to be a willingness to listen, and there has to be a willingness to course correct. Because if course corrections aren't done, workers, quitting used to be a negative thing. Quitting is not considered a negative thing anymore. It's about choice, it's about optionality, and it's about relationship. You don't just work for somebody, you have a relationship with your employer. So you have to constantly assess, and again, it's not just about training, it's not just about skills, it's about experiences, it's about relationships, it's about behaviors, and it's ongoing. It's people laugh and say, and the employee is like my family. It has to be nurtured like a family relationship.
Is that difficult to get that trend to be understood?
It's very difficult, but those who have mastered it, have extremely high retention rates. They have, the benefits, put it this way, it's hard. It's a good investment though, a very good investment.
Yeah, when people start talking about culture and the importance of culture, if you haven't done that work, your eyes glaze over and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to pay them more. I'm just going to give them a bonus. I'm just going to go back and change up some benefits. Those are our go-to things because they're easier. But when you really mine the data about long-term return on investment, and you really look at competitive advantage, how do I get the new person that's looking for a job to come and work for me instead of working for the company down the road. You know, this is the place to start. When I talk with companies and they're like, you know, I'm really struggling, where do I start? First of all, you need to understand that you know, your workforce development journey is a spectrum. Everybody's on a different place in that spectrum, and you've got large companies that are really advanced. You've got companies that they're like, we've just gone with whatever has happened and we've never been intentional in this space, and that's fine. What you need to do is don't panic and freeze and say paying them a couple more bucks is all we can do. You need to say, where do I start? And the answer is retention.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to always be with, I'm going to do a big culture initiative. It does need to do with, I'm going to start this conversation with my employees. I'm going to begin talking with them. I'm going to start getting feedback from them. I'm going to start incorporating the feedback that I can get in the places that I can get it. So the importance of this is not that you feel like you need to be overwhelmed with yet one more gigantic thing that you feel like you can't take on. You just need to recognize this is a journey. You just need to take a step in the right direction and begin the process. And that every piece of research and data really supports the fact that putting in some of this intentional hard work really pays off at the end.
It is a lot of hard work, isn't it, to get to that and to really, well, for one, just to open your eyes and say, okay, this is what we need to do. That's hard work in and of itself, but then to create that culture and have it continue is also hard work.
It's hard work, but constantly retraining people who quit their job is harder work. This is at least hard work that has a positive upside as a great investment. I don't mind hard work, I just want it to have a return. And that's, I think, what it comes down to, is having a return.
Sure. Does that then help people create or deliver, rather, they're doing a great job, they're delivering what you're looking for. So how do you get people to do that? Is that through this culture that you're creating, retention, and showing them that we're listening to you so that you're getting the best out of a person and the best out of your employees in your company?
I think that's part of it. I think also, though, transparency and communication is a huge part of it. I think we have to understand that no one leader has all the answers, that there has to be a willingness to course correct and shift and modify as needed. But again, it's you know, what Julie was talking about, some people refer to as the employee value proposition. And that's that contract or relationship with your employer. And that's just a willingness to, it's not about a fear-based culture anymore. It's about a collaboration and to move, you know, as an organization based on feedback. And I think data, this is a very transactional industry, and some of you all are collecting data and using it, but we're not leveraging the data as well as we should be to provide insights. And you know, some of the old metrics are important, okay? But there's new metrics. This is a transformation opportunity. And how do you distinguish between transformation and just basic change? If you're going to use your old metrics, that's not transformation. Transformation is fundamentally shifting. So is that a scary word? Yes, but it's also so exciting. And the opportunity is there. But use the data, measure, baseline. You gotta baseline, and you have to know where you are, you have to know where you're going, but you also have to challenge yourself and be able to look at the data critically, honestly, and to be able to course correct as needed.
Do you feel like there's a lot of, in our industry, there's a lot of companies that are doing that? Are they introspective and kind of polling their employees and getting a sense, getting a feel for how they're doing, and then using that data? Is that the norm?
I don't think it's the norm. I think that the leaders do that. And sometimes the leaders are the big guns, but sometimes they're not the big guns. They can be a medium-sized company. They can be a small company that grew. So no, I don't think it's the norm in this industry. I'm afraid it's not the norm in most industries except for the classic hospitality of hotels, where the measurements are really around, yield management and stuff like that. So I don't think it's the norm, but I think it is the golden egg, so to speak. The golden egg is out there. You just got to sit on it and help hatch it. So
how do these companies then know how they're doing if they're not being introspective and getting that data and asking those questions? How do they know if they're creating a good culture?
I think you can use certain metrics are a proxy, right? They're not exactly measuring, but they give you indications. So attrition rates, even just cost of goods sold, number of patents in terms of innovation. So I do think there is a baseline set of metrics, and I don't think you should look at one metric. Like, my weight would be perfect if I was 6'3". I'm not 6'3". My point is, you have to look at metrics as a set, because there's always trade-offs, always trade-offs. So I think that the data is there. There needs to be a willingness to mine it. It usually has to be cleansed, but I would say, there's a tendency to want to become data hoarders and collect all the data. Yes, you got to clean it, but the more important thing is act on the data. Don't be so enamored with the data that you don't do anything
you
with
lose
it.
sight of what you're trying to do.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think this goes into the future of work. We haven't had to work that hard in the past. Let's just be really honest. There was bodies to throw at this.
That's right.
So why would I have spent time and resources and effort to go through this process of data mining? That is a big fundamental trend that has changed now that we look at the future of work and what is it going to mean to have to work harder to find and keep employees. And so that is a piece of this. And I want to say, we use the word data a lot, and good data in business strategy is what you want to use. Sometimes you're a business that maybe doesn't have access to good data, so you're going to use the data that you have and can have access to. One of the best things that you can do if you are new to trying to think about talent strategy is you can take a look at your people who have been new to your organization in the last 6 months to a year. And you can go to those people and say, hey, what is it that you might have had a preconceived notion about joining this industry about, and how is it different than maybe it turned out to be? So what you're looking at is, what did I think this was going to be like, but what is it actually like? What have you really liked about working in this industry? You can ask them, why did you leave your last job?
Exactly.
And there are some great insights. What was your onboarding experience like with us? If there was one thing that we could have done differently, what would that have been, right? Do you think, if you're brave, do you think that you'll be with us in 5 years or 2 years or whatever your turnover rate normally is? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to start asking some really good questions that help you make better talent strategy decisions, that help you understand who your employee base is and what your culture looks like. You can also leverage some of that feedback that you're getting for current employees for your recruitment process. So we didn't even talk about what recruitment needs to look like and how that has changed and what are those strategies. But when you can have a conversation with your current employees and you can find out what was your preconceived notion of working for us that turned out to be wrong, and then you can take that and market that in your recruiting process and clarify that, you're making some great progress. And when you can use your marketing or your sales department to join with HR to write different driving job descriptions based on the feedback you're getting for your current employees, target audiences that maybe you didn't recruit from for in the past. So one of the things with recruitment, who's available. Breaking down, instead of throwing your ad out to everybody under God's green earth and hoping that you're going to get a response, what are those target population? Is it women? Is it minorities? Is it second chance citizens? Are you going to recruit veterans? Because every single one of those different talent pools has a different marketing strategy, a different place that you might post those ads, a different way that you're going to word those ads. And when you start recruiting and having a different talent strategy that really starts differentiating yourself, and you're really digging into the markets that are available to you, you're going to see some really different results.
Yeah, there's two things that you mentioned. One is really around that concept of net promoter score, right? And often that's a question that many organizations use. Would you recommend this place to somebody else? Referrals are going to become a much more important way to get qualified employees. And you need a good referral system, because if you're going to refer somebody, you want to make sure that it's positive for them. And the other is exit interviews are there's a richness there, but sometimes organizations don't have the maturity, backbone, whatever you want to call it, to really listen to why people are leaving. Yeah, it's informative to know why somebody left their last job, but it's just as informative to know why they're leaving you. And also, you don't want your first communication to be when you hire somebody, and then 3 years later an exit interview. And the concept of an annual review is very dated. It's much more frequent. It's much more open. It's much more, yes, there has to be goals, but it's more jointly developed.
I think the communication piece that you're talking about here goes back to what you were saying too. When you're having this conversation, you're asking for feedback because you want to use that feedback to do the marketing and recruitment. How are you sure that your employees are being honest with you and they're giving you actual feedback that can help in those topics of recruitment and marketing? Does that come from the culture that you've created in that company?
When you talk about key attributes of successful companies, trust might be like number one on everybody's list, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a organization where your employees trust you, you got some big problems. And that is, core to everything. And I will let you speak to that, because it's like the elephant in the room. You have to have trust.
Yes, and it has to go both ways. The employee needs to trust management, but management also has to trust employees. Again, this is about a relationship. And I don't know how many of you have, are in a relationship with a significant other or a partner. I mean, you have to nurture that relationship, and needs and opportunities change, and it is a moving target, and it has to be nurtured, and there is a commitment involved with that.
I also feel very compelled to mention the fact that communication and culture and trust and all of those squishy things that we're talking about happen when you are willing to have crucial conversations, when you have accountability at the top and down, when you are having the people that are willing to challenge you. How does innovation happen? Innovation doesn't happen by developing a people group around you that's willing to say yes, right? Innovation happens when you have a group of people that has a good enough, healthy enough relationship where they can say, I don't agree with you, and here's why.
Yeah.
And when somebody is not doing or performing the way that they need to perform, you need to hold them accountable, because that's what people do. And that is truly where I can agree to disagree with you. I know you're going to give me constructive feedback. Those are the things that really make it or break it. And soft and squishy does not mean, for the meek and mild. right? You need to be brave enough to have those crucial conversations.
I think the opposite is true as well, right? So as a leader, as a manager, you have to be able to, with your teams, have a productive, authentic conversation.
Yeah.
But employees also need the opportunity. There's nothing like, what some people call 360 feedback. And there needs to be an opportunity for what some people would call psychological safety, to be able to speak their mind and open and give your managers and your leaders feedback as well in a non-punitive, productive way. So based on your earlier chat about trust, it's a two-way street. It has to be a two-way street.
How do you prepare students to go into a workforce where these are the conversations that they need to be having with their employers? Or is that even something that you have to focus on?
Yeah, no, absolutely we do, and we see the best results when we do that. When we trust our people, when we empower them to do the right thing, and set a goal. Here's the goal, but there's so many different ways you could achieve that goal to get there. I'm not going to manage that part of the process. I trust you enough that you'll figure it out, and you'll get us across the finish line. You'll achieve the goal, and that's what I've asked you to do. So, trusting them to do that, they'll do it. Will it always be the right thing? No, it may not always be the right thing, and you can do a little course correction, but allowing them to have that freedom to create and develop and achieve what you've asked them to do on their own terms, I think it's really empowering for people. And if you empower those people, then they feel like you're part of your organization, and the more they feel like they're part of your organization, the more you trust them, the more you trust them, the more they do by themselves. And so it's a cycle that grows in confidence, and people flourish in those kinds of environments. And those are the people that stay.
Yeah.
They stay working for you because they come to work and they can do something creative. They're not just given a task and I have to check out box A, B, and C and then I'm done for the day and then I punch out. No. It's much more collaborative, much more creative, much more trustworthy, and it's relationship building from the perspective of the employee and the employer. And I think, I agree with what you're saying. You get a lot more mileage, a lot more retention.
Yeah.
And then if you do ask those questions on the exit interview, trust isn't going to be one of the ones that comes up and catches you, and they say, oh, well, seemed like a great place to work, but I didn't feel like management really trusted me, and I couldn't really do my own thing. So it wasn't that much fun. So I've heard that company over there trusts their employees. I'm going to go give that a try,
Mm-hmm. And retention is something that you talked about as one of the biggest issues in industries.
Yeah, if you don't start with retention, you get the revolving door, which is a very costly revolving door.
Oh, yes, it is.
And so, that's where you really need to start your focus. And I do, you get companies asking, where do I even begin? Retention, and that's, again, you don't have to start here. You can start here, but, simply having some of those conversations is key. So.
And it also, you have to be willing to challenge the old relationship. Does a person have to be full-time? Can I embrace an older workforce? Can I have people who work at home? So some of the logistics around the work that's being done, it's a bit old school that the person has to be there for you to manage it.
Right.
You just have to have metrics in place to make sure that things are going according to plan.
Yeah. So an interesting statistic that I read from LinkedIn's Global Talent Survey said that in the last, I think it was a couple of years, the word flexibility has increased 340% times in being used in job postings. The word flexibility.
Yes.
340% increase in using that word. And then, when we look at the labor market demographics and who is available based on the declining labor force participation rate, we have this immense, 5 million people that are sitting on the sidelines. And if you think about who's your greatest opportunity to employ, Is it going after people who are happily employed somewhere else? No. You can look at your target population pools. I will say that the number one target population pool that has the highest unemployment rate is second chance citizens with an unemployment rate around 30% or more. So if you want to target a population pool that you think you can get higher from, that's a great one. But everybody else is pretty low unemployment pool. But that group that's sitting on the sidelines, they are there because they have caregiving issues.
Yeah.
They are there because, maybe they're retired and maybe they're bored. But what you want to do is your greatest opportunity for recruiting new employees is actually that silent sitting on the sidelines folks. And if you can create an opportunity for being flexible to bring them in and giving them the opportunity to work around the things that are important for them, you have this gem of a talent pool that you can pull from. And it has everything to do with your ability to become creative, to solve this new challenge in a way that works for you. You want to talk about competitive advantage. If you can pull from that sitting on the sidelines population pool, nobody is going to be competing with you in that. And it has everything to do with marketing and being creative and how you're scheduling.
Agreed.
That's an interesting topic that I'm sure came out of the pandemic. People were sent home, go work from home. They didn't like it at first, then they didn't want to go back to the office, and now flexibility has become such an important piece of recruitment.
Yeah. And if you think about the 1 million women that have not yet returned to the workforce, we know that they wanted to work. We know that they were working. What is stopping them from coming back? Probably caregiving. And so how can you become more flexible in your scheduling in order to invite them back? Not only that, but how are you specifically marketing to and reaching out and inviting that group to come in? One of the tactical things that I've offered the industry that I work with is a site that is called Gender Decoder. It's a gender decoder website. And you drop your job posting in it, and it will let you know if you're using overly masculine language in your job posting. And overly masculine language in a job posting indicates an overly masculine culture, which is automatically eliminating women from answering your job posting. And it also influences minority populations as well. And so if you walk away with one thing, Google your gender decoder website, drop your job postings into that, see what feedback comes back, because this is a new world and a new landscape, and we need to be not just posting the same old stuff. We need to be specifically targeting the population talent pools that we're looking to engage with, and then you need to be thinking about, how do I connect best with this group?
Yeah.
And it's not going to just be posting on Indeed. You're going to need to think about, and I'll give you an example really quickly. One of our manufacturers was struggling to get employees, and they created a $7 welcome baby basket. And they put that welcome baby basket in at their local hospital, and it had diapers and baby powder and cream and whatever. It also had a one-page overview of their organization. And they said, when you're ready to start a career, call us. And they got 7 excellent candidates that they were hired. But if you think about, as you're recruiting people, why people change, here's mom or dad sitting down looking at this new infant thinking, oh my God, now I need to support this child. What am I going to do? And here's this wonderful piece of paper that says, if you are looking for a career, call us. For $7, they did that. And all of the good community will that was out there to get brand awareness. So it's all about, how are you doing this differently? How are you thinking of outside the box? How are you targeting the talent pools that are available in your community?
And Julie, I think that's an excellent example of a point that you made earlier, where we're humans first, employees second, and you have to relate to people first on the human level and then broaden it to the relationship of work. but that's where the appeal is. That's where the common, that's where the bonding is.
Yep. And part of it is saying, changing and influencing industry perception. You can have a great career with us. How are you saying that? Another great example that's a really low-hanging fruit. One of our businesses connected with every mom's group in her region. And she sent out on all these, Facebook moms messaging groups. She was like, hey, if your kids aren't thinking about going to college, we have great careers at our company. We do internships, we train them. If your child isn't a child that's destined to go on to a 4-year college, we have a career for them, contact us. She got great results because who are you targeting? Mom.
Yeah.
Mom wants that child to be successful. Mom wants that child to have a good career. But again, how are we thinking outside of the traditional box to have some new innovative ideas of reaching a different population?
Both of those examples are fascinating about just a small thought process that went into that, and you're going to get some of the best people who are going to apply, but then potentially some of the best employees, because it's so specific to what maybe they don't even know that they're looking for it, but it kind of found them.
Yep. And then this is it. You don't have to be spending a ton of money. What you need to do is invite those creative people on your team that are already working for you into this conversation so that you're getting different thoughts from different population pools. Invite your sales and marketing team to come in and meet with HR and say, let's brainstorm some ideas. Get some new eyes on the issue.
We're looking obviously at the future of workforce development as we're continuing to change. If you could look at maybe some of the biggest challenges moving forward, or for companies or for industries, what would you say some of those are?
I think that, from the work I've done, we all have, accretive points of view, but things are not as predictable as they used to be. So it's the issue of the ability to lead and manage through ambiguity. And we talked about the importance of data, but you also can't let data cripple you. You're not always going to have the answers. So it's the ability to accept that you can't always predict. It doesn't mean you shouldn't plan. Some people have said, it's so crazy, I'm not going to do a plan. I still do plans, but I know absolutely that plan's going to change. So the reason I do plan is so that I already have built-in contingency. So I think that one of the challenges and the things that is excitement is that we live in a dynamic time where old models are challenged, where things are not predictable. And that's challenging, particularly in this industry where food and beverage is perishable. So there are some real challenges when you're working with things that are not predictable. So use the data, qualitative and quantitative. So I think you got to integrate left brain and right brain, to not get crippled by not having a crystal ball. I don't know your thoughts, but
I would not disagree with that. However, I will say, from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we have is we have this group of HR folks that we typically throw this all on, who have all of that foundational HR work that they need to do. They just survived COVID and are still trying to make sure that our companies are getting through COVID. They are burnt out, and now we are turning to them and saying, hey, you need to become community outreach experts.
Yeah.
You need to be partnering. You need to be building that pipeline. You need to do better onboarding. You need to do a cultural transformation. And these people are like, and I think I'm going to go find some other career path. And so I think one of the biggest things is understanding the capacity of HR to bring to the table what you need to do. And, my challenge to companies is if you have at all the resources, you need to understand that HR needs somebody else in order to accomplish this. Yeah. If you don't have any more resources, you need to open up this door to other people in your organization that could raise their hands about, I'm going to volunteer to help build that pipeline. I'm going to sit down because I'm really creative and I went to college for marketing 400 years ago and I'd love to take a stab at thinking how we could do this different. You've got somebody who maybe is a real big people person and an influencer in your organization and doesn't have any status, but you know they influence all those people. And you need to create a work project group that says, let's talk about culture. And so really understanding the limits of your HR area and how can you go beyond that to still accomplish it without just handing the ball to HR and saying, see ya, because then it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
Did you have a thought about some of the challenges that this industry is facing?
Well, you know, I've always said this, that talent will go where it's welcomed and it will stay where it's appreciated. So if you set the stage by creating a good culture in your company and you lay the groundwork for that talent to be welcome, once you've got them in, then if there's a clear pathway and a career for them within the company so that they can see their future with you, they're going to stay.
yeah.
Well, the floor is yours. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss while we have the time with you that you think we didn't cover? We covered a whole lot, which was all very fascinating
bit,
and
yeah.
interesting.
I think it's an exciting time. I mean, it's a very dynamic time, and I'm encouraged. You know, part of me wishes I was born 10 years later, you know, because I'm at age 62, but I'm excited about how things are coming together and the opportunities, and not just from an industry, but the role that this industry plays for the bigger issues, like we talked about, for sustainability, for, you know, developing career paths and building wealth in disadvantaged places. So I think it's a wonderful time, but it doesn't happen automatically and spontaneously. It does take an effort.
Takes some work. Yeah.
I will just say that the business leaders who get the fact that this is the time that you need to align your talent strategy with your business strategy and take those steps. Capitalism at its best. They are going to win the war for talent. The leaders of the companies who think that they can just get by getting by, again, good luck. And you know, I hope that we see you in a couple of years. And I would say, and I don't say that lightly, I say that because winning the war for talent is going to become one of the biggest issues for every industry sector that we have in this nation. And this is the time, not 2 years from now or 5 years from now, to take it seriously and be one of the winners. So.
Well said. Well said. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and for having this conversation. We really appreciate it. Maureen, Julie, and Chef Adam, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
You so much for joining us for Workforce Development in today's ever-changing world. We would please ask you to check out NAFEM.org and be sure to follow us using the hashtag NAFEM. Thank you.